I thought because I had my certificate of clinical competency from the American Speech, Hearing, and Language Association that I really knew everything. And I had a master's degree from a wonderful school. So I thought I really knew everything. And when I discovered that I had these youngsters who just, in the schools in speech therapy that weren't learning, they weren't succeeding, and you'd fix the sound up in the beginning of a word and they got it, and then you teach the sound at the end of the word and the sound in the beginning of the word they forgot it, and you go back and forth, and they couldn't hold on to these things. I went to the school psychologist and I said, these kids, I've never seen children like this before. And she looked up at the scores and checked, and she said, they all have reading problems too. But there's a lady who teaches at Hood College, and she knows something about this. Her name is Dr. Margaret Rawson. And so we went to visit Margaret, and she looked at the list of kids, and she said, oh, yes, they're all dyslexic, and all their families are dyslexic, and I will teach a course, a graduate course, for which you can have 6 credits. But everyone in the course must have a practicum because I need tutors to work with these children. And so she taught a class. This was one of the first graduate courses, year long, 6 graduate credits, in what she called language reeducation. How do you re-educate a child? How do you teach a teacher? You know. And I took that course, and we tutored kids. And every week she'd come in with what I thought briefcases full of books and materials and things. And when she had her visitors come from all over the country and from all over Europe, she would invite many of us students to her home in Frederick and say, oh, Dr. So-and-so is here from such and such a place. Come and meet him. And I'd sit on the floor and listen to this language, and listen to this lecturing, and listen to this discussion going past me, and I was just in awe. I was just in awe. And so it was really on Margaret's coattails that I was swept into this field and learned that this is something that works. You can sit down with a child and you can work with a child, and you can see the child blossom, and you can see this child grow. And it was being with Margaret. It was not just taking a course. And by the way, she said, because you were all professionals. There was a lady who taught at the School for the Deaf in Baltimore, and a woman in the course who was a speech person. She said, you're all professionals. So for this hour-long tutoring, you can all charge, I forget if she told us we could charge $2 or $3 for the hour, because she said we were all professionals, But sitting in Margaret's living room and traveling around with her on her coattails, I entered a world that I never knew I could ever enter, with people who were ordinary people who were brilliant. They were brilliant scholars. They were wonderful thinkers. They were creative in their ideas and in the way they taught people. And it was just, I was mesmerized, and I think I still am. My personal life, oh well. I grew up in a nice family in Brooklyn, New York. I had an older sister who was brilliant, who did everything very well. And when I started school, I did nothing well. And nobody could understand what was the matter with me. My sister was always well put together. I was always dropping books, dropping pencils. My braids were flying all over the place. I could walk down the aisle in my elementary school classroom, and just walking from my seat to the teacher's desk, I could manage to drop 2 or 3 things, knock something off somebody's desk, trip, you know. When I took piano lessons, I simply could not ever get the scales right. I could not read the notes. And nobody knew what was the matter with me. And I kind of funked through school, not being able to do very well with math at all. I hated math. Geometry was horrible. Um, I hated school, but then I started college. And you talk about, neuronal maturation, the maturational lag in the brain. And suddenly I had a professor in college that was good and it clicked and I started to get things. I could get what he was saying. I could understand what he was saying and doing. And so for me, it was a very interesting road. And when I finally, and I developed my own way of doing things, I would take notes. This was my psychology professor. I would take notes. I'd go home and I'd type it out on my new typewriter because we didn't have computers then. And I would type in red and I would underline things. And then I would meet a friend in the park and I would explain to my friend everything wonderful that went on in that class. So what was I doing? I was doing a multisensory review. I was looking at things color coded visually. I was typing the notes over again. I was talking to somebody about what I learned, multisensory teaching, that I did myself. And after I started working with Margaret and studying with her, it dawned on me that I probably was quite dyslexic. My handwriting is atrocious. And so this was very important to me. It was a very important thing for me, for my learning. And I looked at some of my family members and I started evaluating who they were and what they were. And of course, my children, when they came along and were having difficulties in school, two very bright kids, very different. My daughter's a wonderful writer. She was dyslexic. We know there are some dyslexic writers they can't write things down, but the ideas can come out and they can write in other ways than using pen and paper. So to me, this was very personal. And it got more personal as I started working with youngsters and with young adults and with adults. Because every person could have been me.